this press conference of the United States Senate delegation to COP29. In just a moment, I will invite Senators Sheldon Whitehouse and Ed Markey to deliver opening remarks before we engage in a Q&A. A few reminders. Please raise your hand to indicate you'd like to ask a question. We will have a mic on each side of the room. When you have the mic, please introduce yourself with your name and your outlet. And please stick to one question so we can get to the multiple reporters in this room. With that, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for coming here today. I'm particularly honored to have traveled to the COP29 here in Baku with Ed Markey, who has been, I would say, Congress's climate champion going back to the Waxman-Markey climate legislation, which, had the Senate passed it back then, would have kept us from being in such a dangerous position right now. So I'm very gratified to be here with Ed. We sit on the Environment Public Works Committee together, and I think we share a sense of optimism despite the lateness of the hour to meet climate targets. What everybody sees is obvious, and that is that the United States has suffered a climate setback with the recent election. It is unfortunate to lose the executive branch of the federal government as an ally in the fight against climate change, and it's particularly unfortunate if the executive branch turns into the bureaucratic glove for the hand of the fossil fuel industry. We'll have to see about that. We have major battles and challenges ahead on that subject. But the underlying facts are that an enormous amount of the climate work that's being done in the United States is being done at the state and municipal level. And if you look just at California, the 5th largest economy in the world, and New York, the 10th largest economy in the world, they can get a lot done just by working together, irrespective of who the president is. If you look at our region, New England, we have multiple states involved in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, a small carbon pricing plan. If you look at the fuel economy standards, they're essentially driven by California and the 17 states that all participate in that state-level standard. So there will rise up very significant state-level activity to fill the gap that the Trump administration will leave. The second thing that is going to keep climate progress moving is economics. And there's a push and there's a pull. The pull is that clean energy is cheaper as well as cleaner. Even if you don't give it credit for being cleaner, it's still cheaper. And that market pressure is going to continue. The second, the push, is that it has long been predicted that the uncertainties created by climate change will make property insurance extremely challenging. We are already seeing that in Florida, where home insurance prices have quadrupled, where insurance companies have gone bankrupt, where insurance companies have fled the state, where the state has had to prop up an alternative insurer to fill the hole in the market. And what the chief economist for the mortgage giant Freddie Mac has told us is that what happens is that the insurance crisis rolls into a mortgage crisis, because you need insurance to get a mortgage, and that rolls into a property values crash. Because unless you're a billionaire living at Mar-a-Lago, then it's easy. You find another billionaire, they pay cash, you sell the house. But if you're a plumber living in a development outside of Orlando, you need mortgages to sell your house. And so we're seeing it already in the insurance market. It's beginning to infiltrate the mortgage market, and we're seeing the early hints of it affecting property values. When that goes, it could go very suddenly, very broadly, and very deeply. The warning from the chief economist was that this will be, just from a coastal property values crash, an economic hit to the United States as bad as the 2008 mortgage meltdown, which, as you know, went global. So that's going to keep a lot of attention on this problem as that becomes increasingly apparent. The last point that I'll make is that all across the globe, people and institutions who have fiduciary duties are going to have to make statements and decisions that are consistent with the facts of climate. The climate problem is no longer just on the scientific horizon, it's now on the fiduciary horizon. And we're seeing investment managers, bankers, CEOs, corporate boards of directors having to adapt to the reality of climate or face liability for failing in their fiduciary duty. That is what caused the fossil fuel industry to stand up its fake anti-ESG campaign to try to knock it back. But that's not going to last because the fiduciary responsibility is a responsibility at law. My two goals here, the things that I think will make this COP a success, one is that the EU and UK countries who are in the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, get increased resolution to stand fast and hold particularly the United States, to accountability under their tariff regime. It's the right thing to do, it sends a global price signal, and it will change the political dynamic in the United States favorably. The second is methane. We can now track the damned stuff by satellites. We're beginning to enforce in the United States through EPA's super emitters program, through the Department of Justice, Methane Enforcement Task Force. That should be a global initiative. And if we can't get that concluded here, it should be a priority for Brazil. Where satellites detect a leak, enforcement should follow wherever you are on the globe. If we can do those two things, I think we will have made important steps towards climate safety. Just one last word on the CBAM. Senator Markey and I are both very attuned to the concern in developing nations that they have not been responsible for this mess, and yet their populations feel it more painfully and more acutely and more immediately than anybody else. The CBAM actually accomplishes the most important thing we can for developing nations, which is to avoid a climate crisis, because the full bore of the climate crisis is going to fall so hard on developing nations compared to developed nations. Our number one job has to be to head that off, and that's where carbon pricing comes in. There are no remaining scenarios by which we avoid climate catastrophe without carbon pricing. So we have to get that done, and then we have to sort through which countries get actual economic advantage from carbon border tariffs, because there are many, and which ones will suffer economically, and focus our attention on those so that we can meet the demands of economic justice and the moral requirement for particularly our country, that we make sure that the climate solution is a fair and just climate solution. So that's why we came. We've made those points pretty relentlessly. And let me turn it over now to Senator Markey, the legend from Massachusetts.
Well, thank you, Senator Whitehouse. And just for clarification, Senator Whitehouse has been the chairman of the Budget Committee in the United States Senate for the last 2 years. And what did he take the Budget Committee and turn its agenda to focus upon? It was more than 20 hearings on climate change and the impact upon the American economy and on the global economy. That's what he did. So that spotlight, of course, is one that really did come into play with two storms that hit the United States in a 2-week period, Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene, which caused $300 billion worth of damage. That's 35% of the entire defense budget. Every aircraft carrier, every fighter jet, everything that the United States has, 1/3 of that was just two storms. And when it went over Florida, I think all Donald Trump was saying to himself, I hope Mar-a-Lago doesn't turn into Mar-a-Lagoon, because it missed Mar-a-Lago. But the next time it may not, but it hit millions of other people. And the impact was catastrophic. And it's just a preview of coming atrocities that climate change is creating for potentially any community in the United States or across the planet. So it's just been great being here with everyone, and we just want to let you know that we're not going to allow COP to stand for courting oil profits. We're here to tell you that COP really stands for climate outlast presidents. The Trump presidency will just be a footnote in history, just very quickly dismissed because of the inexorable upward trajectory of the investment in clean energy technologies in the United States and across the planet. The climate targets established through updated nationally determined contributions are going to outlive Donald Trump. The new climate finance goals can outlast a climate denier. By coming here to show our support for ambitious action, we can hammer in the nails for the signposts that we will hopefully use in the not too distant future to find our way back to the negotiating table. Trump may pull the United States out of the Paris Agreement, but he cannot pull the United States out of a revolution which is taking place in the United States, in wind, in solar, in all-electric vehicles, in battery storage technologies. It's happening, and it's happening very rapidly. Even if Trump makes public climate finance an uphill battle, we can't follow his lead in declaring climate bankruptcy or running out on the bill. By supporting a climate finance goal of more than $1 trillion by year, by pushing for more from multilateral banks, and by showcasing climate leadership, we can prevent developing nations from being forced to pay the United States climate damage tab and instead fund a livable future for everyone. And by fighting back against limitless, needless, and reckless fossil fuel exports, we can start turning off the tap and backing up the global push to phase out fossil fuels. And that's why I join advocates and global legislators today in calling for a rejection of fossil fuel exports and a full fossil fuel phase out. The United States is set to double fossil gas exports in the next 5 years. But supercharged LNG exports will be a new energy tax, courtesy of Donald Trump, on all American households. Fossil fuel exports just increase costs for American households in order to increase profits for fossil fuel executives. The estimates now are that LNG exports already cost Americans $111 billion in just the last year, from September of 2021, when LNG exports began to skyrocket, to December of 2022. Pretty simple rule of Economics 101. The more natural gas you take out of the United States means that that which is left is going to have a higher price, supply and demand. And American consumers, businesses are paying it. And what we have to do is then to make sure that the rest of the world doesn't pay the price for what the United States natural gas industry wants to do. And here's why there's a big problem looming for the industry. While the U.S. gets ready to double its exports, our allies in Europe, the entire European community are expecting a 50% decline in natural gas demand by 2030. Can I say that again? A 50% decline in natural gas demand in Europe by 2030. Last year, more investment was made in solar than oil for the first time in global history, and it's never going back. This is just going to continue. If fossil fuel exports aren't for our own energy security or cost savings, and they're not for our allies' energy security, we'll have to look to the $173 billion in profits taken home by the 15 biggest U.S. fossil fuel companies for an explanation. While fossil fuel companies try to yank money out of our pockets, the Inflation Reduction Act is still working to put money right back in. In 2 years alone, it has created 400,000 new clean energy jobs in the United States. It's unleashed $372 billion of public and private investment in the United States. And disproportionately, those jobs are in red states, red congressional districts. And so if Trump wants to try to repeal the IRA, he's going to have to convince the congressmen who represent the 80% of the money that went to their congressional districts, the red congressional districts that created 400,000 new jobs with a promise of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of more over the next 8 years, the duration of that bill. So that's going to be the future. And I'm optimistic. Senator Whitehouse is optimistic that this revolution is unstoppable. And we were here just to let all of these delegates from around the world know that. And I think what excites Sheldon and me the most is all the young people who are here. You can see still the excitement, the demand that we do something. The first generation to suffer from climate change and the last generation who can do anything about it. And they're going to be demanding it across the planet. And so the United States at the city level, at the state level, and Sheldon and I are in the Congress, we're going to fight hard to preserve the vast majority of the IRA. So those incentives are there to continue to deploy the clean energy technology, the wind, the solar, the all-electric vehicles, the battery storage technology, any technology that reduces greenhouse gases, and to make sure that we do the right thing, because it is the political, economic, environmental, and moral issue of all time, and we must solve this problem, and we're just here to tell people that the United States is still in. So I thank all of you and turn it back to Sheldon.
Questions?
Hi, Alec Loon from Scientific American. Donald Trump talks a lot about energy security, energy independence, cracking down on Chinese imports. If the U.S. focuses on fossil fuel expansion rather than clean tech, if the U.S. cuts back on foreign aid money, if the U.S. repeals parts of the IRA, if the U.S. isolates itself from the world, doesn't that give countries like China room to grow, compete better, fill that void in climate policy, climate finance, and international foreign aid?
Yes, there are two things wrong with the energy security propaganda that the fossil fuel industry is putting out. One is, you simply cannot have energy security if you are dependent on a product whose price you can't control domestically. When a foreign cartel drives the price of oil and gas, it will always be out of America's control. That is not energy security. The other aspect is that there's a mercantile challenge for dominance in markets. And if we don't keep moving forward, other countries will eat our lunch, as the saying goes. So it's going to be really important to do that. And as I've mentioned here, the CBAM creates an emissions-based tariff that, because of China's emissions, falls much more heavily on Chinese products. So that actually accomplishes what Trump's trade representative, Ambassador Lighthizer, has said he wants to do, and it moves manufacturing and jobs to the United States, which is something that I would expect the Trump administration would welcome. And there's bipartisan carbon tariff conversations happening. So I would not, there's plenty of opportunity for progress around carbon tariffs, and the real energy security comes when our own clean energy technologies at home are providing the bulk, if not all, of our energy.
China has a plan. China wants to be the dominant country in the world manufacturing renewables, manufacturing all-electric vehicles, manufacturing battery technologies, and exporting those technologies around the planet. China has a plan. Donald Trump does not have a plan. If they have a plan and we do not have a plan, we will lose. We will lose markets around the planet. We'll lose the cutting-edge technological breakthroughs that otherwise would have been incentivized here in the United States. And generations will look back and wonder, what were they thinking to allow China to take such an insurmountable lead over the United States? If the United States has a plan and China has a plan, we will win. But you have to have a plan. The IRA is that plan. Increasing fuel economy standards is that plan. Having utilities have to reduce their greenhouse gases and install new technologies invented in America, that's a plan. Having tax breaks for new metals that are going to be developed, that's a plan. So we're going to be having a mighty battle in the United States House and Senate over the next several months over whether or not we should have a plan or not. Otherwise, we should just get used to having the whole rest of the world buy products that say made in China, because they will be better technologically and they'll be cheaper. If we don't get in this race, then we will lose. There's just no two ways about it. And Donald Trump is going to, I think, learn a lot about how many Republican congressmen want to have stuff made in America, innovated in America. And I think he's in for a rude awakening, to be honest with you. I don't think there's any question about it. We went first on these technologies. You all have one in your pocket right now. You also, and many of you also have a version of a tablet or an iPod. We went first in the United States, branded it Made in America. It's the new language that we created. Google, eBay, Amazon, Hulu, YouTube, Made in America. And China's been trying to catch up for 25 years. So we have the same choice on clean energy technologies. If we have a plan and we keep it in place and we expand it, then we'll win. And Sheldon and I are looking forward to having that debate in the Environment Committee and across all of the Senate in the first half of 2025. And we think that young people are going to respond. We think that red state congressmen are going to respond because they'll want the jobs to compete in their home districts. They're not going to want to lose that incredible opportunity to raise up and to train a whole new generation of young Americans in the deployment of these technologies.
Thais Gadealara from Climatica. I would like to know if you have been in talks, or are you planning to work together with local legislators of Argentina, considering that the actual government of Milei is having similar climate policies, not based in science, of course, like Donald Trump did and probably is going to do in his second term. Thank you.
For me, no. This COP is coming to its end. Argentina has made its decision. I think those conversations will take place as we move towards Brazil.
Hello, Aina Zabaliva for Baku TV. Hello, gentlemen. The question is, 60 pro-Armenian U.S. Congress members have appealed to the U.S. government calling for sanctions against Azerbaijan, including during the 44-day war. However, Armenia has been occupying and terrorizing both ecologically as well as ruining historical Azerbaijani monuments on the territory of Karabakh that belongs to Azerbaijan and is internationally recognized. No sanctions imposed against Armenia, not even a proposition to do so, even after Armenia has been involved in circumventing US sanctions imposed over countries involved in conflicts. Why, in your opinion, still no action to impose sanctions against Armenia? Thank you.
I think Senator Markey and I support Armenia, both of us. We are very regretful that the dislocation of so many Armenians has taken place. To put it mildly, I'm far from convinced that Armenians are to blame for that. And I don't want to dwell in the home of my hosts on human rights issues, but if that were to be the topic, I would not be very complimentary. Ed?
We believe that the political prisoners should be released. We believe there should be a right of return of Armenians to Nagorno-Karabakh. And we believe that there should be a peace treaty between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And our hope is that it's negotiated soon so that these issues can be resolved, including the issue of a capacity to have a road that can be traversed through Armenia by Azerbaijan. But it all has to be part of a negotiated treaty. My hope is that that will be the case, but as Sheldon said, you know, we ultimately need to make sure that those prisoners are released and that there is a right to return peacefully by Armenian people to Nagorno-Karabakh.
For time's sake, this will be the last question.
Thank you very much. Polita Clark, Financial Times. Mr. Trump is being pressed by his allies this time around to withdraw not just from the Paris Agreement, but from its parent treaty, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And some legal scholars think it could require as much as a two-thirds Senate majority for the US to rejoin under a future Democratic president. Others disagree, but I just wonder, as two serving senators, what your views are, please. Thank you.
I haven't looked at what the rejoining requirement would be parliamentarily on the Senate floor. Our immediate struggle is to try to convince the Trump administration of the folly of such ideas, and we'll just have to watch as that develops over the next 2 months of the Biden administration and the early months of the Trump administration. I think a lot of this is going to come out in the context of confirmation hearings in the Senate, and we're looking forward to energetic engagement with his nominees.
There's a rude awakening that the Trump anti-environment nominees are going to receive. He's intending not on appointing a cabinet, but on appointing a cartel who will control American environmental and energy agencies. It is going to create an uproar across our country. America did not vote to dismantle the environmental protections in our country. They may have voted on certain other issues, and that's what drove their vote, but no one was voting, with the exception of the oil, gas, and coal industry, for the kinds of fundamental changes in environmental law which Donald Trump is proposing and his cabinet members have committed to implementing. It is going to be one of the most turbulent political debates that we've seen in a generation. And it's going to give rise to young people once again at the university and high school level in the United States coming out of the woodwork to begin to lobby for the protection of all those environmental protections. And in fact, I think by the end of this debate, people will be wondering why we're not making them stronger. So that would be my conclusion as to my own personal history in Congress, which is when Ronald Reagan tried to do it, the firestorm was intense. When Newt Gingrich tried to do it, the firestorm was intense. When George W. Bush tried to do it, the firestorm was intense. And what Donald Trump is doing is going to make all of those look tame compared to the uprising from our country if he seeks to dismantle those environmental protections.
I think those are good words to end on. I'm sorry that the time has run out. I know many of you didn't get to your questions. My apologies.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for being here.